Hello everyone, I'm JJ Dixon and we are back again. Today we are here with a very special young man, Mr. L.B. Scott. You're going to get a chance to hear a little bit more about Mr. Scott, and he'll talk about a very special program and organization to the city of Jacksonville, and that is the Jacksonville Police Athletic League. He spent a lot of time there and has graduated on up to the State Police Athletic League. So before I get to getting into all that stuff, because I do get excited when we talk about helping children, I want to find out a little bit about Mr. Scott, who you are.
Okay, I'm L.B. Scott. I was raised in St. Augustine, Florida. Okay, and I came to Jacksonville in 1970 when I was hired as a police officer.
Okay.
And I served for 28 years.
Wow,
as a police officer for Jacksonville. And basically, I never liked it. I'm always honest about that.
Never liked policing?
I never liked being a police officer.
Wow,
and matter of fact, I had made up my mind that I was going to quit.
Wow.
And I was playing basketball on the police basketball team. I like to brag about this. I'm one of the few people, and we were the only team from St. Johns County to this day that ever win a state basketball championship.
Wow,
I was on that team.
All right.
Okay, that was 1964.
Wow.
And so I have to brag a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, you deserve that.
But truthfully, I came to Jacksonville, got the job, went to the academy, and I was telling a young lady earlier that there were 6 black officers.
Okay.
That's the first time they had hired 6 at one time since the original 6.
Wow.
Okay, so that was kind of different. And we graduated from the academy, went to work, and that's when I found out I really didn't like being a police officer.
So was policing something that you thought you wanted to do as a kid?
Well, no. I was an MP in the Army. And so being that I had been trained to be a military policeman, I figured I got to have a job. I got a wife and a son that I got to take care of. So I applied for the job, came to Jacksonville. And back then, if you were from out of town, I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina in the military. They would set you up where you could do everything in one day. If you passed the exam, they would send you immediately to get your physicals and everything done, so you didn't have to come back.
Right.
So they hired me, didn't tell me they would hire me. They said they would be in contact with me. And I got out of the Army on February the 13th, 1970. And that Monday, I decided I got to go find a job. So I went down to the sheriff's office just to inquire. They said, "You didn't get our letter?
Wow.
You've been hired. You can either come to work tomorrow if you want to, or you can wait until the academy class starts on March the 2nd. So being that I had been in the military, I said, I'm going to take a couple of weeks and relax a little bit. So I started the academy on March the 2nd, 1970.
Wow.
And like I say, the academy was different because they do a good job of, I call it propagandizing, and make sure you think everything's just fine and dandy. And then when you get out on the street, you find there's something altogether different. Well, my makeup, it just didn't fit my makeup. So first thing I did, I got into an incident. And this was after I'd been on about 1.5 years. And they really would have liked to have fired me.
Wow. Because
I got into a shooting with some white folks. And so fortunately, Charles Scriven, former chief, and the black officers and the Brotherhood saved my job.
Wow.
I'm just going to be honest with you. They helped me take care of my family because they suspended me for a month, and I had no way of taking care of my family. So Brotherhood provided, they paid my salary for the whole time I was suspended. And that's why I've always been a supporter of the Brotherhood and always will be. Okay. And but anyway, make a long story short, I'm just not, my makeup is not to be a police officer.
Did you notice a difference between policing out here and policing in the military?
Well, you got to understand something. In the military, they trained you, and a part of your daily routine and training was unarmed defense.
Okay.
Okay? They gave you a 45 caliber Colt with 2 magazines of ammo, but not one bullet in the gun.
Wow.
If you were going to shoot somebody, you had to load the gun to do it. Okay? But every single day, what they would say is, you had better not shoot none of our soldiers. Okay?
Okay.
So when I got here, I found out things were different. And when you go to roll call and you hear some of the things were said, that just wasn't who I was. And not to mention that I've always been outspoken. My family, I come from a family of people who are outspoken. And I was a part of the 1963-64 civil rights demonstrations in St. Augustine. So there was a lot of things I just didn't feel were right.
Wow.
And it was very difficult for me to adjust. But in my spare time, like I've always done, I played basketball. And that's where I met Norm Demers, because he was coaching the police basketball team.
Oh, okay.
And we kind of got along very well. So he was running the police outlet league. I didn't even know what police outlet league was, truthfully. And one day we were just talking, and he said, you know, you're a young man, you're in good condition. I would like for you to come to PAL and work for me. Well, because I was president of the Brotherhood,
right,
anytime I would apply for a transfer, that didn't go nowhere.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Okay, nowhere. Okay, so it just so happened that Bob Irvin, I don't know if you remember him, he was the director on the police department, and he was the director of operations, and at that time he was a captain. So they wouldn't let me transfer, so I went to him and I said, look, I'm getting kind of tired of this, and I had made up my mind I was going to quit. So
how many years in were you then?
I had a little over 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
I will tell you funny. I never rode anything other than 302, 4, and 5, which was Ashley Street, and back then that was the area. If you wanted to have to work the entire day and half night or whenever you was out there, that was the place to be. And they wouldn't let me transfer off that beat. Okay, and so when he said, you know, he'd like for me to come to PAL, I said, okay, but they're not going to allow that to happen. But what happened, Bob Irvin, because I threatened the police department. I said, if you all letting all these other young rookies come on, they go wherever they want to go, but me, you treat it differently.
Right.
So I'm here to tell you, if this happens one more time, we go into court. Okay?
Better get their attention on it.
And I meant what I was saying, because one thing about my dad owned a horse and carriage business in St. Augustine, and my dad said, do whatever you got to do, I'll pay for it. Okay? So I was dead set on doing that. So Bob Irvin said to me, he says, look, I can't just transfer you, but I'll give you another job within the zone where you are. So I walked the beat for about 2 years downtown. And during the time I was walking that beat, one day they come up and they says, look, we have an officer that we don't want to assign to a black school. So how would you like to have that job? I said, sounds like a winner to me. I'm okay with it. So I became a school resource officer over at Stanton.
You know, I never knew that.
Yeah.
All right.
And I worked there for a while. And during the summer, they had to put us somewhere. So they started talking about places, different things we could do. So someone suggested that they put me at PAL. So I went to PAL for the summer, and that was supposed to be a temporary thing. Then I was supposed to go back to the school. But what happened, I would like to give too much credit to people, but John Gordon, who became the undersheriff, under Nat Glover, was a lieutenant in community affairs at that time. And because I was assigned to community affairs, and actually John Gordon and I had written beats together years ago. And he says, tell you what we're going to do. When they transfer everybody back to the schools, you stay at PAL. If they don't catch it, then you just stay at PAL.
Wow.
And they didn't.
So you stayed there.
So I stayed at PAL. And then when they tried to transfer me, they were having some manpower shortages. They tried to transfer me back. The undersheriff at that time said, no, it's been really peaceful since he hadn't been down here. Let him stay out
there. They were happy to have you out of the way, right?
Yeah. And he actually said that.
So when you first went to PAL, I mean, obviously we know later on you became the executive director, and I'm sure you'll talk about that. But when you first went to PAL, what were you doing?
Basically, I was a program coordinator, and we had 6 full-time officers who were assigned to PAL. I was the only young guy. The rest of these guys were old, ready to retire guys that were assigned there. And so basically, we couldn't get anybody to do anything other than Norm and I. When it comes to getting equipment ready for the kids to use and things to do, he found in me somebody that I would stay there and help him with whatever needs to be doing. Okay, because I found out while I was there that this is something I can do that ain't got nothing to do with police work. I ain't got to put nobody in jail. Okay, I ain't got to write no tickets. Right. So I'm going to be right here working with these kids. And it became, it took me a while to really understand, JJ. You have to know my upbringing to really understand. I'm a person who believes in God Almighty. Oh, yeah. And I believe He controls everything and anything. Okay? And after a while being at PAL, I looked at it as my ministry. It was what God wanted me to do. Okay, and I felt that way then, and here I am 45 years later, and I still feel the same about it. It's something that needs to be done. And the reason I say that is because of this. Growing up during the days of segregation and experiencing the things I experienced during the Civil Rights era, I felt like we needed young men in particular who would set a good example for our kids. That's right. And that was my main driving force. And so, you know, but I'm going to tell you one more story that I think is an important part of my life. Okay. I lived on what was then Central Avenue. It's now Martin Luther King in St. Augustine at that time. And on the corner of South Street and Central Avenue, from that point on were white families. And there were nothing but white families in that direction mostly. I always say that St. Augustine, Florida is different from most towns. If you ever go there and you ride around and you look and think about it, there's no real housing patterns, black, white type stuff. Okay? I don't know whether that was intentional or whether they just didn't, things weren't the same. Right. I don't know what caused that. But everywhere I ever lived down there were always white folks around. Okay? On the corner, there was one sergeant for the city of St. Augustine. His name was Pete Duhan. I will never forget that man. On Saturdays, the kids, most of the black kids, we'd be out on the side of the Seventh-day Adventist Church playing sandlot football. His son was the only young white kid around there. So he would just come and stand out there and wouldn't say anything and watch us play ball. So one day, the kid comes up and he says, "You don't mind if I play?" He said, "Man, you've been coming over here every day. We didn't care. You know, whether you play or not, if you want to play, fine. As long as you can take this hitting." Because this is sandlot football without a uniform. Okay. So he started playing with us, and one day his dad comes by in the patrol car. And he sat out there in the car for a few minutes, and we didn't know what he was doing. And he drove away. About 45 minutes later, he drives back up. He gets out of the car with a bag. And in the bag was ice cream, cups of ice cream.
Oh, nice.
And he bought ice cream for every kid out there. And he would stand around sometimes and talk to us. Okay, so I was never really afraid because they only had one black police officer in St. Augustine at that time, and this guy was a white guy who didn't mind talking to you.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I developed a thing where I wasn't afraid because he used to tell us, man, there's no reason to be afraid of police. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so over the years, and I think he stayed there until he died.
Wow.
On that corner.
But he made a great impact on your life.
But I always remember that we felt differently about the police because of him, that one individual.
Right.
Okay? So when I went to PAL and started being able to actually do something with kids and realizing that you can make so much of an impact on these young people, I was committed to that.
Yeah.
Okay, because where my folks bought a house on South Whitney Street in St. Augustine, and it was on a hill, and it's 2-story, and it's the only 2-story house around there, so we overlooked everything in the area. I could look out my window from my bedroom on the top floor, and I could see a school that I couldn't attend, and I couldn't go there and play in the yard. It was less than 2 blocks from my house. Okay, I always remember those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so when I started working at PAL and I realized what we could do, I never had any idea that I would be one day in charge of PAL. I'm just being upfront and honest.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, that thought never entered my mind. I just was doing whatever I was asked to do.
Right.
And I worked there for 11 years when Norm Demers was the executive director. And one day he comes into the building. We were at 1041 South Macduff Avenue. And he comes in and he says, I need to see you upstairs. Well, Norm and I argued all the time. That's how we got along. Okay, we argued all the time about anything and everything. And he says, "I need to see you upstairs." And I said to Dozell Varner, who was the boxing coordinator at that time, I said, "Oh, here we go again," because Dozell and I shared an office. And so I went upstairs, and he said, "Close the door." And I said, "What's happening?" He says, I'm going to retire in 30 days. He hadn't told anybody. No one knew or suspected.
Wow.
He says, I'm going to retire in 30 days. I'm going to recommend to the board of directors that they make you executive director.
And this was after 11 years of working there.
Yeah. And I said, Norm, I appreciate the thought, but with my history with GSO, that ain't going to happen. And that's just what I told him. I said, it's not going to happen. I'm honest. I'm always honest and frank with myself personally. I said, that's not going to happen. And he said to me, Scotty, they don't have a choice. And I said, what do you mean they don't have a choice? He said, you're the only one I trained to do the job.
Wow. He set you up.
Well, I stayed mad with him all the time about stuff. Because every time something would come along, a new program needed to be done, anything, here, you need to do this. Tell you how we got our first soccer program. He got a grant to buy some soccer goals. The only time I ever saw soccer was when I was in the Army in Germany. Knew nothing about it. So I told him, I said, well, how do you expect me to run a soccer program? I don't know anything about soccer. He handed me a book and said, read this and do it.
Wow.
Okay.
And you were upset about that at the time.
Yeah, I was I was mad with him all the time about something anyway. But I learned over the years he was an individual that he liked confrontation. You know, he liked people who would stand up.
Right.
Okay, and then I would stand up. If you say something I don't like, I'm going to tell you I don't like it. You know what I mean? And so over the years, he would give me these assignments, and I'd get mad. He said, I need you to go out and talk to a club tonight. Maybe it was the Rotary Club or Mid-Anak or some of these clubs that had money. I need you to go give a talk about PAL. And I said, why don't you get some of these other guys to do it? I was assigned to work today from 8 to 5, and I'm getting ready to get off, and this thing don't even start to 6:30.
Didn't want to be doing all that, huh?
And he said, well, you know, I want you to do this. Do it to help the program. Okay, so I'd end up going out and doing those kinds of things. And anytime we had things that needed to be done that I thought were important, then I tended to stay around and help. But I was doing that not because I was ordered to do it or somebody, you know, forced me to do it, but I knew that if our kids were going to have what they needed to have, somebody needed to step up to the plate and do some of these things because the other guys weren't. Me, Dozell, and Norm would get out there and work. If football equipment needed repairing and chin straps and put on them and all that stuff, we stayed there and did that, regardless of how much time it took.
This is interesting because some of us that, and when I say some of us that came on later on with the sheriff's office in the 80s and 90s, we knew that you were at PAL, but we just always knew you as being the executive director. So it is so good to get an insight into where you came from, because I never knew you really put in the work. I developed, my main thing was basketball, because I was a basketball player. And, but basically we built our sports programs into the biggest in this town. Yeah, you did. If I could testify, because when I came over there, it was, I think, around 98 or 99, something like that. And I ended up with the basketball program. I was blown away. The first thing they told me to do was go get all the files and figure out how many kids they had in the basketball program. And it was thousands. I don't mean 1 or 2,000. It was thousands.
See, we had a tremendous program. Okay, when I went there, really they did pretty good. But we had just a few, I think 24 basketball teams. And over the years, we finally had to stop it at 6.
Yeah, you grew it. You all really grew.
Yeah, we finally had to stop
all the programs. But basketball and I think football were your two shining programs.
At one point, we had 30 tackle football teams with 30 kids each. Wow. Okay, and it was a big deal to keep up with that stuff and to make sure it happened. The thing that I think that today that bothers me more than any other single thing, I have to give Norm credit. He had a system for developing PAL. And I guess, I don't know where he got it from, but his thing was, get out here to these churches, these civic organizations in the community. During the time when your sport's not running, you get out here and you meet with these people and you talk to them, you let them know what this program's all about and that you need their help. JJ, I kid you not, we had over 400 volunteers every year doing programs. We didn't pay nobody to do nothing.
That's right.
Other than the police officer.
And they were running you all down. And I'll say this too. Earlier on, people assumed that PAL was just for the poor kids, and maybe initially it was, but eventually you all grew the program to a point where not only was it for those that were disadvantaged, but it was for those who were how can I say this? Who were talently disadvantaged. So they would seek out the PAL program. It was for all kids. But they would seek out the program because they wanted to be able to enjoy learning and being challenged by the kind of talent that PAL had in the children.
See, let me tell you something. You know you've got a great program when we grew to a certain point where people were calling us from Ponte Vedra, bringing kids from Ponte
That's what I'm talking
all
about.
the way to West 33rd Street to play in Pal because of the quality.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, that's about a 45-minute drive, one way.
Yeah, if the traffic's not bad.
Right, one way.
Okay.
After school.
And we had a tremendous amount of that type of a thing, and mainly because we had developed a reputation for one, a quality program.
That's right.
Uniforms and equipment was as good as anybody's, because I'm a firm believer. When I was in high school, our coach, Malcolm Jones, who was the coach of the team down there in St. Augustine, said, "We can be the worst team in the world, but we're going to look better than everybody."
That's right. We're going to look good losing, right?
We're going to look good. Of course, we didn't lose because we had
you didn't lose very much at all
during that time. But, I always think about that, and I think about the pride that kids need to develop growing up. Being proud to be a part of something. We used to keep the building spotless. Okay? And there was a reason for that. I insisted that it be clean all the time and that things look good, because I wanted kids to be proud to say, I'm a part of the Jacksonville Police Athletic League. JJ, people don't realize that Jacksonville, Florida is the largest police athletic league program this side of Philadelphia. Okay? And to be honest with you, it's better than most PAL chapters. That's how I got elected president of the National Association of Police Athletic League, because they recognized the quality of the programs that we had. When we were before everybody when we built that classroom facility over there on West 33rd Street.
And it's nice.
You see what I mean?
Because a lot of people just saw PAL as being an athletic program, but you added another.
You know how that started, truthfully?
How did it start?
I was approached that we could get a grant from the state to fund an after-school program for African-American males. Okay? And so what I did, I went to the middle schools in the area and said, can we get some of your worst of the worst?
Worst of the worst.
And that's just what I asked for. I don't want the good kids. If the good kids want to be involved, we'll take them. But I want you to identify kids who really need our help. So we ended up with Eugene J. Butler at that time, middle school. Northwestern was the middle school. And trying to think of who the other one was. But there was 3 of them. And we used to pick them up, bring them to PAL. And at first, we had that little classroom that was on the side there in the front of the building on 33rd. And we got up to over 100 kids.
In that little space?
Yeah, so we said, we got to do something. This ain't going to work. So then came up with the idea that maybe we could build a classroom facility. Now, you got to keep in mind, we never had any money. And the sheriff's office nowadays do contribute money financially to the operation of the PAL program. But when I went there, and even up until the time I retired, they give us money. They gave us personnel, they gave us cars.
Everything but the money.
But they didn't give us any money. We had to raise the money to operate the program. When we bought that building on West 33rd Street, that building belonged to the Jacksonville Police Athletic League Incorporated. Sheriff's office didn't buy that building. Sheriff's office didn't convert it. I did. Okay? And by saying I'm not talking about me just by myself. But with the help of the business
under your leadership.
With the help of our staff, because we had, and that's something I'm extremely proud of, we had people, police officers in particular, who worked there because, to be honest with you, I handpicked them. The first question I asked any of them, if they wanted to come to work at PAL, how much volunteer work have you done in the community? Okay? Because if you didn't do any volunteer work in the community, I really wasn't interested in you working there. Because I wanted people who would come there and not do this because it's just a job. Because they enjoyed doing it, they realized the benefits of it to our young people, and that makes a difference. Kids know when you're genuine.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
You ever heard one of them say, "It's just your job. You know, you're going to be here for 8 hours and then you're going to leave." They know.
No, you got to learn, and I spent most of my time, both day and night, for many years at the Jacksonville Police Athletic League.
I know you won't be able to probably name them all, or maybe you will, but I would like for you to call the names of some of the ones that worked over there with you.
Oh, I can do that. That's not really a big deal. Okay. Basically, Dexter Green
Basketball.
did our basketball program, but Dexter basically did just about anything. Okay. Because Dexter was one of those guys who has an athletic background. You know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Dexter was a small college All-American football player.
I knew he played football, but I didn't know he was that good.
Yeah. He played at Southern University.
Wow, okay.
And you know, he loved working with the kids, and that's why I picked him. Dottie Young was the first female officer that we had. And I picked Dottie because she was qualified to run our educational programs and do some things we really needed doing at that time. And she ran our summer camp, and I'm bragging, and I will always brag. We had the best summer camp in Jacksonville, Florida. Matter of fact, not just Jacksonville, pretty much anywhere. Because the kids, when they came to summer camp at Jacksonville, Pal, had something to do all the time. They wasn't just sitting around there playing basketball or whatever. You know, if a kid couldn't swim, she had it planned in where they, by the time the summer was over, they learned to swim and swim well. Okay, those are things that to me were important because I had a brother who drowned. My only brother drowned. I was 9, he was 12.
Wow.
So it was important to me that we did that. So we planned that into every summer camp that the kids who came there, by the time we're done, would know how to swim. Okay. And so that was a part of it. She had field trips. Kids were going to Georgia on field trips. They went to University of Florida, Florida A&M, Bethune. We had things that they could benefit from and learn from, because my idea in life is, how does a kid know what to shoot for in his life if he's not exposed to anything?
You got to show him.
Okay. And what I discovered early on in my career, because it took me a while when I was a basketball coordinator to convince Norm that we needed to travel. We needed to take kids places. That costs money.
Boy, did they enjoy that, though. Boy, those kids enjoyed that.
Well, think about it. If you're a kid, and this is a story I was going to tell you. We were going to Washington, D.C. by bus. We left in the middle of the night. That's a long trip. Okay. And had a chartered bus. And we were riding. And I was sitting in the front seat. And there was a kid sitting right behind me from Hollybrook Homes. I will never forget that as long as I live. He was on our 12 and under team. Good basketball player. Good kid. And he sat there all night long, looking out the window. Oh, wow. And that's what caught my attention. So finally I told him, I said, man, aren't you tired? Don't you need to get some rest? He said, Officer Scott, I've never been out of Jacksonville, Florida. I intend to see everything I can see. Okay? And
that's awesome.
Me. Yeah. It really did.
Yeah.
I said, because here's a kid that we didn't realize had never been out of the city of Jacksonville. And I always used to tell kids, there's a world out there that you need to experience in order to be well-rounded in life. Okay? Wow. And so that's when we decided we'd take kids to these tournaments and events. It wasn't about the sports. Right. It was about exposing them to things that we felt like they needed to be exposed to. Okay, and so, you know, we had Dottie, we had Dexter, Gary Thigpen worked there. Matter of fact, Gary was I call it my liaisons, okay, because if I needed money, Gary knew a lot of people in Jacksonville who had money, okay.
He could go get it.
And he could get to see them. So, you know, he would set it up. He would take me to meet with him, and that's how we raised quite a bit of money. Wow. Okay, then Donnie Clark was a member of our staff, and Donnie was an older officer at that time, but Donnie was heavily involved in youth athletics at Southside Estates. And he said, you know, I like to give this thing, pal, a try. But he had no idea of the amount of work and programs that we had. And Donnie came there and we charged him with starting a baseball program. And in 2 years, we had over 40 baseball teams.
Wow. Teams?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. And he took a real liking. God bless him. He passed away here.
Yeah.
And but he said, man, if I would have known how much work it was, I never would have asked you to come here.
But I'm sure once they got out there, they wouldn't trade it for the world.
No, it was, and like he said, it was a good experience, but I chose him because another officer recommended him. Tommy Tyson.
Oh yeah, we all know and love Tommy.
A staff person. And Tommy says, I got just the guy for you. He said, Donnie coached my son in baseball. And he's a good guy. He can get along with anybody. And I recommend him. So I interviewed him, and he said he wanted the job, so I gave it to him. Okay? Because working at PAL, you have to be, whether you're black officer, white officer, whatever, you got to be a kid's person.
That's right.
First and foremost. Okay?
Got to be.
So, because I will not have anybody mistreating my children.
That's right.
If you want a problem with me,
mess with one of your babies, huh?
Kids. Of course, I learned that from Norm, to be honest with you. We were working the Gator Bowl game concession stand for PAL to raise some money. And we had a bunch of our kids out there, and we run a concession stand. And this guy, I'll never forget, it was a team from West Virginia. This guy comes up at the end of the game, and he wanted a box of popcorn. And we had shut down. We were shutting everything down. The game was over, and we trying to get out of there. And the kid told the gentleman that I've only got these small boxes. I want a big one. So the guy said, well, sir, we only have these.
Small ones.
And before I could turn around and say anything, the guy takes his hand and knocks the popcorn
wrong thing
all
to do,
over the kid. Now, I was a young man and in good condition at that time, but before I could get across the counter, Norm Demers jumped across the counter, and I shouldn't say this.
Wore him out, huh?
Dang.
Wore him out.
You don't ever do that to one of my children. Okay? And we had to actually pull Norm off of the speed. And that's when I learned what really caring about kids meant.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't do this because it was a job. You did it because you love being able to interact with the kids. Dexter and I were talking on the phone this morning, and I always say, when I get up every day, I normally say, thank you, God, for allowing me to do what we do. Because I look at it as a blessing.
Oh, yeah.
I really do. And, but to make a long story short, I'll go through some of the others. We had Jerry Williamson. Jerry was a black belt in karate, and we selected him mainly because we had a large karate program at that time, and he came in and organized our karate program. And the great benefit of that was that Jerry had connections within the karate schools and stuff around town, and karate was our biggest fundraiser.
Wow.
We could do a one-day karate tournament and make $13,000 or $14,000 in one day profit.
Wow.
On a karate tournament.
Well, that was a good one.
We'd have hundreds of people come and sign up to participate in our karate tournaments. We'd have the entire gym, both floors lined off in squares that they use for karate competitions. And it would go on all day long.
But back then, it seems like all the sports were like that, though.
Oh, yeah.
All of the, because boxing was, boxing was, boxing. And football, people would be out there all day with all those teams.
You know, I got some old football program pictures because we mainly did football. It rains all day on Saturdays, and Andrew Jackson all day. And it was, before I retired, we were up to 24 tackle football teams. And it was a lot of fun. Plus, St. Johns County, when they finally got a power program, they participated with us. And Suwannee County, they came down here, they participated with us, Clay County. So when it was all said and done, our football coordinator was coordinating about 40 teams. And when you got 30 kids per team, that's a lot of kids.
That's a lot.
Okay?
That's a lot.
And I always like to tell this story because it was interesting. When we first bought West 33rd Street and converted it into a youth center, none of the sheriffs prior to Jim McMillan had ever set foot there. Okay, at night or anything.
On West 33rd, I bet they had.
West 33rd Street. So one night, out of clear blue sky, I was there doing some paperwork. Jim McMillan shows up at PAL. And Dexter comes up there because I'm sitting in my office. He says, "Scotty, the sheriff's back there in the gym." And I said, "What?" Because that was totally surprising to me. He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what's he doing? What does he want?" He says, "Well, he's just out there walking around talking to people." So I went back there, and sure enough, he was out there. And he said, I asked him, I said, "Sheriff, is something wrong?" Because I thought something maybe was wrong. He showed up out there at night. And he said, "No," he said, "you're always talking about the program." Because one thing about him, he would come to the board meetings and stuff. And he said, "But I just decided I was going to see for myself what it is you said you do." Okay? And so he asked me how many people was in the gym. And back then, I know you've been around, you know what I'm talking about. It was standing room only.
Right.
Okay? So I said probably around 750 is the amount of people that's in the gym. He said, "That touches a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah.
The parents are back there.
Oh, yeah.
The kids are out here having a good time." He said, "That's a big deal far as I'm concerned."
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever really talked to him about anything. And so we stood back there, but what he didn't understand was that was the first game of the night.
There were more to come.
So you know what happens, they leave, another group comes.
Okay. Just that size probably.
And so he said to me that night, he says, "You and I need to talk." So I said, "Okay."
That's when he realized how big it was.
There you go. So we went up to my office and he says, "Okay." He says, "I had no idea." He said, "Yeah, I come to the meetings and I listen and pay attention, but you are touching not only the kids, the parents and people in the community who
the
just
entire
show up
community.
here to watch the game."
The entire
you see
community.
What I mean? He said, "This is important." He said, "It's important for the sheriff's office and our image in the community." So he told me that night, he said, "You are the executive director."
Wow.
I was already the executive director. But I had to answer to a sergeant, a lieutenant, a chief to get anything done, basically. He said, "From this day on, you're the executive director of the Jacksonville Police Athletic League. You have my support and my permission to run this program as you see fit. You don't have to ask nobody nothing other than the board of directors." Okay? So he took me out of the chain of command. That's what he did.
Wonderful.
Okay?
But you had earned that privilege because you had put in the work.
Yeah.
You had proven that you knew how to run the program and built it up. I bet you didn't.
No, I absolutely didn't. And from that day on, when he was sheriff, no matter what I asked him to do for that program, he did.
It was done.
Okay. Right. And he made it clear that night. He says, "If you need me to go with you to raise money for this program, all you got to do is call my secretary, Vicky, and tell her that I said whatever I'm doing, she's to change my schedule and I'm to go with you to raise money for this program." Okay? And that was it was good in a lot of ways.
also mention, I remember there was cheerleading that was extremely popular.
Very big program.
It was extremely popular because you had a lot of young girls from these underprivileged communities that couldn't afford to pay $200-300 to cheer anywhere else. Yeah. And boy, they took pride in it. Boy, they took pride in it.
We had the first police athletic league cheerleading competition ever, anywhere.
But you started something when you did that.
Well, yeah, we started cheerleading. Many things that Jacksonville PAL had at that time. We were the first PAL this side of Washington, D.C. to do double Dutch.
Yep, I was going to mention double Dutch.
That was a unique program for us. Okay, we did a lot of things that people didn't really realize. We were trendsetters.
Right.
Okay, we were doing things that other chapters weren't. Do you realize we were, I'll never forget it, City Councilman Jim Tullis asked me we had a little 25-passenger minibus, and it was air conditioned, and they didn't have any air conditioned buses, and Terry Parker High School needed to take a baseball team to Pensacola. They didn't want to ride a Yellowhound to Pensacola. So they said, how many people can your minibus hold? I said, 25 and a driver. They said, would you allow them to take one of your guys to take the team to Pensacola? And I said, no. And I was serious. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Because first of all, I got to part with a police officer because he got to drive the bus for a whole week. And we just can't afford to do that.
Right.
Okay? And what's in it for me? What's in it for PAL? Okay? So he said to me, he said, this is important because there's no more air-conditioned buses they can get around here. So if you will allow one of the officers to drive, whatever you want that I can provide, I will do. I said, you sure you want to make that statement? Because I already had in mind what I
laundry list of things, right?
Okay. And he says, yeah, I'm serious. He said, we got some recreational bond money. So if you need something, you tell me what it is, and I'll see can we get it done. And what he didn't know was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I showed up. And what he didn't know was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I showed up with a thing to purchase, a customized Bluebird bus.
Want a whole
with
bus.
Air conditioned, luggage compartments underneath, the whole 9 yards. I said, this is what I want.
Well, he said whatever you wanted.
And he says, how much that thing going to cost? At that time, it was about $86,000, which was a lot of money. Okay. And he said, man, I didn't realize it was going to cost that much. I said, well, this is what you told me, anything we wanted. So here you are.
Right.
So we ended up getting that first bus and customization because
it was customized.
This wasn't just something we just bought. We had it built specifically for Jacksonville PAL. Okay, it held 49 kids and a driver, air conditioned, high back seats, armrests, everything.
It was nice, huh?
And the suspension was air, so it wasn't like a normal school bus would be.
Wow.
And we've had that joker painted in our colors, Columbia blue and navy.
Yep.
And trimmed in silver.
I remember that bus.
So we showed up at the National Police Athletic League tournament in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, when that thing was brand new, and it was the talk of the town.
Couldn't tell you nothing,
because nobody had anything like that. Okay.
But once again, Jacksonville PAL has always been trendsetter. They have always been
quality of program for the kids.
Yeah. Okay. They have always been the example for everyone else to follow.
And that's something I'm extremely proud of to this day.
And you should be.
Because we had an opportunity to do something that had never been done. And I tell people all the time, they say, well, where did you get those ideas from? I said, what do you mean, where did I get the ideas from? With me, I don't mean to sound flaky, but I never knew what I was doing. No, I'm serious. I really never really had training to do what I was doing. Okay, I just knew it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And so if I needed to study something or be involved in something, I'd worry about that. But I was not afraid to take that leap and do things. Okay, that building on West 33rd Street, when I proposed that, they said, man, you ain't got no money. How you gonna get a building? Okay, no, that's the truth. And I'll tell you how it went down, because that's a crucial part of the history of Jacksonville PAL. Okay, we had so many teams and stuff, and Stanton College Prep had opened. We had been using that gym for our gym because they didn't have sports programs. So after school, we could go there and run our entire basketball program out of that gym, which was a very nice gym.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I said, okay, we just kept growing and growing. Then we had to borrow Andrew Jackson or somewhere else to play. And I just thought to myself, I said, we need a place of our own, because I'm a old-fashioned guy and I believe in God bless the child who's got his own. Okay, so one day we were setting up football to play football. This is a true story. Gary Thigpen was driving and I was in the car, and we had been out to Rains High School to meet with Coach Day, God bless him, to get our football program set up to use Rains football field. A lot of people don't know this, but Rains would never let anybody use that football during the time that we used it on Saturdays. Okay, that was reserved for PAL. Okay, and so we were going out there to make sure everything was lined up, and on our way back, we got caught by a train. Oh, right there where the train crosses Wine Creek. And we sat there, and I finally woke up and said, Gary, turn around, go back up to 45th Street, go down 45th, we're going to go to Avenue B, and we're going to make a left. We got to be able to get around this train, okay? So, and we did that, and we made that turn onto West 33rd Street, because the train stopped about 10 feet from the intersection, okay? And we crossed the railroad track, and lo and behold, here's a big old building that's fairly new that had a big old for sale sign on it. Now, I always talk about my shortcomings as well as strong points. And we looked at the building, and I said, man, what could a big old building like that be, and it's fairly new? Why would it be for sale out here? Okay? And Gary says, I'm going to pull over. Let's get the, Gary Thigpen was the driver. And he said, let's get the number for the real estate company. Let's call and check. Because what I told him right then, I said, as big as that building is, if there's no posts or anything in the inside impeding what we could do with it, it might make a good PAL center. And it's in a good location, low incomes, housing and everybody all the way around it. So it's something maybe we could look into. But I went back to the office and I started doing other things. But you would have to know Gary Thigpen to understand. I always said that Gary was annoying, because if he got something in his crawl, he wouldn't stop. So about an hour later, he comes by, Scotty, hey, did you all call the real estate company? Gary, I'm busy. I'm doing some paperwork right now. I don't have time. 30, 40 minutes later, Scotty, you ever call that real estate company? this is true now. I'm not kidding.
He wanted you to call and find out about that building.
He had annoyed me to that point that I had gotten sick of him. So I said, Gary, okay, I'm going to do it right now. I picked up the phone, I called the guy. The guy said, yeah, I'll be glad to show you the building and let you see what's there. He said, but you need to do that today. This was on a Thursday, okay? But he didn't explain why. So I said, okay, we'll meet you out there. So we go out there, and then lo and behold, you got an air-conditioned back, because all that warehouse area was air conditioned. And the reason for it, I didn't know this because I don't drink. Beer has to be stored at 65 degrees. Okay, so it had to be air conditioned.
Okay, so that's what it was.
Yeah. And so I said, this might be a good idea. Okay. I said, but we don't have no money. And the guy said, and on top of that, this coming Tuesday, this building is going to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Okay?
Wow.
And he gave me a paper that had the qualifications. JJ, I kid you not, you had to have $40,000 if you won the bid to give them, and that was non-refundable.
Wow.
You couldn't get it back. If you won the bid, you gave them a check for 40 grand, and you had 30 days to come up with the money to buy that building. Okay?
Wow.
So naturally, being the executive director, I didn't have a vote on the board. And to buy that building, we had to have the board's approval. So I called the sheriff and I said, look, I got an idea here, something that I think would be great for us to do. And we'd like to see if we can convince the board to bid on this building. And McMillan said, I think you're probably right. He said, but where you gonna get the money? And I said,
he was letting you know you wasn't getting it from him.
Oh yeah, up front. Of course, I knew that all along. He said, actually, I think it's a good idea. You need to call a meeting of the board. Well, by this time, it's Friday. The building's going up for auction on Tuesday. So the only time we could meet was on Sunday. I did 1041 South McDowell.
Yeah.
So we got a quorum, enough members of the board to show up that we could talk about it. My division chief, God bless him, D.R. Horn, who we later named the building after, was animally opposed to it. Ain't no people gonna come out here. It's a dangerous area. He had probably 100 reasons why we shouldn't buy that building. But the board went along with me. And I had one other thing going for me. The sheriff couldn't come to the meeting. And he did something that they have never done before or since. And he said, L.B., I have my confidence that you will make this happen. So I'm going to give you my proxy vote. You vote for me as the sheriff.
Wow.
And whatever decision you make, you got to live with. So if you make a decision that y'all going to buy this building, then you got to make it happen.
Wow.
And so that's what happened. We agreed to buy it. And we were able to go out there. They set a cap. The building was appraised at $1.6 million. And they set a cap that we could only bid up to $400,000. And I was very skeptical that we would be able to buy that building, but knowing what I know now, I should have known better. There was one company from Tampa who showed up to bid on the building other than us. When they got to $375,000, they quit. And they were taking $5,000 increments. So we bid $380,000. It was myself and Bob Severn, who was the president of our board. And we ended up buying the building. The guy says, okay, I need a check for 40 grand. Remember, this is non-refundable.
Did you write him a personal check?
Get it back. I should have, but that would have bounced all the way across town. But anyway, we gave him the check. And then Bob looks at me and he says, I sure hope you know where you're going to get this money from. I said, well, I figure that the building's appraised at $1.6 million. We bought the building at $375,000. We should be able to borrow enough money using the building as collateral to do this. Now, I'm not a business person, but I do know value when I see it.
That's right.
Okay, so we approached the bank, which was then Atlantic National out there. It's now Wells Fargo, because the vice president was on our board. At that time, the interest rates, the percentage rate was 18%. So PR1, who was the chief of community affairs, worked for Winn-Dixie. And when we were going through all this stuff, trying to figure out how we're going to get the money to build this building, to buy this building and then to convert it, he says, well, maybe I can introduce L.B. to Mr. J.E. Davis.
The owner of Winn-Dixie.
I never met Mr. Davis, didn't know who he was, really, other than the Davis brothers were the main owners of Winn-Dixie. And so he says, yeah, I'll see what I can do to set that up. So one day he comes by the building over there, 1041 South McDowell, and he says, come on, we got to meet with Mr. Davis real quick. So I said, okay, and as we're going out the door, these are the little things you remember. He holds his keys up. He wants me to drive him. So we go over there, and do you remember Chief Horn?
I don't remember. The name I know, but I don't remember him.
Chief Horn was a graduate of the University of Georgia. He was about 6'5", weighed over 300 pounds. Okay, and talked real slow. And he goes over there. We walk into Mr. Davis's office, and he says, Mr. J.E., this is Officer Scott. He's the executive director of the Police Athletic League. They come under me, and he needs to talk to you about a project. Now, I'm thinking he's going to sit down and help me because he's on the board.
Right.
And he says, L.B., tell him what you need. I'll be back.
Oh, and left you in there with him.
There was the first time in my life.
Wow.
Didn't know anything about. And I explained to him what we were trying to do. And he said, okay, what do you want? I said, won't you give us $500,000? He looked at me and says, son, do I look like I just fell off? He said, man, I ain't gonna give you all the $500,000. And he started to laugh, which hurt my feelings. And it was all I could do to contain myself. But he said, but I tell you what, I like what you gotta say. And I like the impact that it will probably have on the community. He said, so I got a deal for you. I said, okay, what's the deal? He said, I will loan you $500,000.
Wow.
Loan. He said, and you will not be able to beat this deal, so y'all need to take it.
Wow.
I will give it to you at 7%. But the terms are not negotiable. You can't negotiate these terms at all. I'm going to give you 3 years to pay me back every dime. If you don't, I'm going to take your bill. He was upfront about it. Okay? He said, so I'm going to call my person who handles our contracts and all that, have them come in, we're going to draw up a contract, we're going to get a contract signed, and understand, you're going to pay me quarterly payments, because I'm going to give you a little time to start. Every quarter, you're going to have to pay me $20,833.
He had it figured out, didn't he?
Plus interest.
He had it figured out.
Every quarter.
Wow.
Okay?
But needless to say, nevertheless, you got the funding.
I said, we got a deal. Because like I say, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. and we needed that building.
Yeah.
Okay? So we walk out of there, and Chief Horn says to me, I sure would like to know where you go get it.
So pay this man back.
I said, well, I just believe that this is what is supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. All I got to do is be willing to work.
And as you can see, following your dream, trusting your heart and your gut, and knowing that you're a man of faith, and you knew that God was going to make a way for that to happen.
Well, yeah, because it was for the kids.
Right, and that's what I was just getting ready to get at. Look at how many thousands, probably tens of thousands at this point, of children have benefited from that. So
see some of them, I run across them all the time, who are productive, well, I guess, adjusted young adults, high school principals, attorneys. Jacksonville Pal has kids who have done some wonderful things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And most of the time, the first thing I get from Officer Scott, remember when?
Because they don't forget.
So we did that.
They don't forget.
It meant something to them. I normally don't remember what they're talking about.
But they don't forget. They don't forget.
So we were able to buy that building, and the last payment we had to make, this is the truth, the very last payment we had to make on that building, I had raised little over $14,000. The payment was $20,000 interest. I had tapped into every single business person I could find. Okay? And I just didn't know anybody else to go to. And Carolyn Edwards, who was my administrator.
Yeah, I remember Carolyn. She's in St. Johns County now.
Yeah. Carolyn said, Scotty, you better let the sheriff know about this because we don't want it.
That sounds like Carolyn too.
So I called him, and he said, what's going on? I explained it to him. He kind of grinned. He said, come down to my office. And I'm saying, okay, I'm from here. So I go down there, and he says to me, he says, it's funny that you would call me today. This was Wednesday, okay? And he said, the thing is, I'm supposed to be running for election. Nobody has qualified to run against me. So I've been raising money.
All this money.
And I've been telling the people that I've been raising it from, if nobody runs against me, I'm going to donate this money, less the cost of what it costs my campaign to this point, to the police athletic league. Okay? I said, how much do you think that is? He says, picked up the phone, he called George Dandeley, who's his campaign treasurer, you know, he worked for the sheriff. And then Alex said, right now you got over $60,000.
Wow, so you had more than enough.
There you go.
More than enough.
He said, the deadline for qualification for sheriff is 12 noon Friday. He said, at 12:01, I want you to be on the phone with George Danforth.
Get your money.
Said, cut you a check for $60,000.
Wow.
To the police athletic league.
Wow. Well, hats off to Sheriff McMillan.
Let me tell you something. But he never told us he was doing that.
Well, it's probably a good thing he didn't, because you wouldn't have worked as hard as you did if you'd have known the money was sitting there. But you know, I just want to take this time out on behalf of all of us, the children, the parents, the police officers, the whole community, to probably do something that may possibly never have been done, and that is to thank you for your service to and through the Jacksonville PAL, and for all of the stuff that happened behind the scenes that people will never know about, the sacrifices that you and your family made just to make sure that children had a place to go where they were safe, where they could learn, where they could enjoy sports and all of that kind of stuff. I want to thank you for doing that for the city of Jacksonville.
Thank you for saying that, but I will tell you what my thanks has been for many years. I cannot walk around Jacksonville without running into some kid as an adult who participated in the Jacksonville Police Athletic League.
That's wonderful.
And most of the time, like I say is Officer Scott, remember when, okay? So I tell people all the time, I never had rank. I never made one dime. That's the truth. More than any other police officer on the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, being the executive director of Jacksonville PAL. But what my thing is, as an old man now, I'm 77, walking around and hearing young men and young women saying, remember when you did this or when you did that, because they were there and they benefited from it. That is my thing.
That's what it's all about.
No one else has to thank me.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. So, that is your legacy. Well, that's what they call it. That's your legacy.
And I will believe that to the day I leave this earth.
It was.